Hello, welcome to E-Rate 101, Navigating Bus Wi-Fi for 2024. My name is Krystle Pearson, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for the Education team here at Kajeet. I am so excited to have those that are in attendance to join us as we talk about this new initiative that has just come forward from the FCC in October about using bus Wi-Fi via E-Rate funding. Next slide, please. As we begin today's presentation, I'm going to give you all a few moments to comment in the chat. You feel free to submit any questions as we go through the presentation through our Q&A, but right now we would love to hear where you're from, your title, and what made you decide to join today's E-Rate webinar. As I get started, I want to talk a little bit about the amazing panelists that I have joining me today. I have Eric Grubbs with me, who is the K-12 account manager here at Kajeet. Eric, as a webinar guest, is a seasoned educator with over 9 years of experience teaching in math in middle school and high schools. Transitioning to school administration, he served as an assistant principal and later became the principal of a local elementary school. With a decade-long of commitment to education, Eric also took on the role of, get this, school bus supervisor, overseeing 13 bus routes at the high school and 9 at the elementary school, including 2 routes for exceptional education students. So we are excited to have Eric here. I can't think of a better colleague to help me to navigate this webinar for today. Eric, is there anything else you'd like to share outside of what I've already shared about your amazing background?
Thank you, Krystle. That was a great introduction. The only thing I would like to add is that as a bus supervisor for almost 10 years, I really wish I had had this opportunity to apply for bus Wi-Fi for my team. I just feel like distractions to my bus drivers would have been a lot less if I'd had this kind of technology on our buses.
I can totally agree. As a former K-12 technology director myself, as well as a classroom teacher, I've seen it from the classroom to the extended classroom. And being a technology director during COVID was, you really were boots on the ground and had to get devices in students' hands. So seeing this initiative and being able to help support districts in this, I'm so excited about it. And I can't wait to see how this unfolds. However, enough about me. I have to talk about our other panelists. Jim Kerr brings over 40 years of extensive technology and marketing experience to the table. His expertise lies in project management, specializing in voice and data communication systems, designs, you name it, integration. Jim has you covered. Additionally, Jim works with facilities in wiring design, systems integrations, and was a financial analyst. For the past 25 years, woo, Jim, he has focused on the FCC's E-Rate program and the K-12 education sector. Since 2009, Jim has served as the principal consultant owner of K&B Associates, a company offering E-Rate marketing and consulting services, along with access to its E-Rate SaaS e-profit works for service providers and manufacturers. Remarkably, and this is so notable, Jim's clients were successfully awarded over $300 million in E-Rate applications in 2023 alone. So I'm just, Jim, you're the person, you're the go-to. I'm so excited to have you here. Is there anything else you would like to share with us that I haven't already mentioned in your information here?
I don't feel that old. Although I must admit, I'm ensconced in my home quarantining. I actually tested positive for COVID yesterday, so I was supposed to be traveling. So forgive me if I've got a little bit of the sniffles or head cold thing going on. But happy to be here and happy to offer what little insight I might have into school bus Wi-Fi and the process as far as the FCC is concerned.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get ready to get started. At this time, our chat will be closed, but we encourage any attendees to please submit any questions that you have during the duration of this webinar within our Q&A section. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, as a former K-12 technology director, I can't even fathom the thought of what I would have done had I been in the position of many of you all on this call today. In alignment with those that we currently serve, Kajeet has supported over 500 plus school districts with our smart bus solution. Here you will see some of the school districts that we've had the pleasure of being in partnership with, as we know that you all are the boots on the ground, and it just serves us a great pleasure to be able to provide assistance to bring connectivity solutions to students across the United States. So here we have Farmington, Aurora, Raytown, several districts, not only just to name these few, but there are so many that are doing impactful work within the K-12 community with our smart bus solution. Next slide, please. As we talk about school bus Wi-Fi, one of the things that I can say about myself is I love data. Numbers are where it's at. And as you can see here, there is a lot of data to support the need for bus Wi-Fi connectivity on school buses and how it can support districts. The average child spends a total of 24 school days on the bus each year, which is the equivalent of about 48 minutes per day, according to Ed Choice. When you're thinking about students and the connectivity, not only do we provide solution supports for students within the classroom, but as educators, transportation directors, school leaders, it is always our responsibility to make sure that students that are on the go can remain connected. However, there are about 12 million K-12 students that are without reliable internet access at home, according to Common Sense Media. That is a problem, and we have to continue to work to bridge the gap in making sure that students have that access no matter where they choose to study. When you think about the cost, it's less than $1 per student per month for those students to be able to have the benefits of school bus Wi-Fi. Now, I can tell you there can always be a little hesitancy about what can be approved and what is not allowed for students to be able to connect. So we know about your TikToks and your Snapchats and some of those things that put educators and teachers and tech directors on the edge of their seats, because it is our job to keep our students safe both in and out of the classroom. So when you think about some of those filtering components for an academic school year, some of the top 5 sites that were denied by Kajeet include what you see here on the screen. 65 million times a school domain has been accessed by students while using Kajeet Smart Bus solutions. Now, this is not 65 million school districts, but 65 million times. But when you do the math and you equivalent that to the amount of districts that are in the United States, those are amazing numbers as students are being able to connect on the go. When you think about the number of education sites accessed by students via Kajeet Smart Bus solution, this academic year alone, we are sitting at 22 million. So not only are we keeping students safe, we are increasing the amount of time that they have for instructional outside of the classroom. It's costing less than $1 per day. We are denying those access to those inappropriate sites or those things that are not educationally appropriate, while continuing to help to bridge the gap for those students that do not have reliable internet access at home. Next slide, please. So as we get ready to head into the E-rate portion of today's webinar and hear from our expert on the call, Jim, we're going to do a quick poll to see a little bit of information about what you all have seen within your districts and some of the things that you would like to see or what your plans are coming soon. So this poll asks, when do you plan to apply for E-rate funding to support your school bus Wi-Fi solution? We're going to give it a couple of minutes to get that information in, and then shortly we'll have those poll results to pop up. So we encourage you all to vote during this time. And as we head over to our next slide, we're going to share those results momentarily, but let's go ahead and kick it right into our E-rate process, which you all are here to see. Oh, here we go. Here are our results. We have 31% that says this year, 19% that says next year, and we have about 50% that said they are not sure. So we are so excited that you are here today, because we hope that this information can help to encourage you to continue with your process. For those that are not, to give you a little bit of a boost as to why you possibly should, and to bring some light onto those that are not sure exactly when they plan to apply. So we're going to kick it over to Jim, where we talk about this amazing timeline and get a breakdown of how those that are on the call can be a part of the E-rate application process. Jim.
Thanks, Krystle. So let's start with everybody has to do their own needs assessment. Hopefully you're actively engaged in that process if you haven't already issued your Form 470. But engage in the needs assessment process, budget processes and review, figure out what you need, what you want to buy through the E-rate process, and then submit your Form 470. At that point in time, you also have to have an RFP prepared. This rules state that if you don't have enough specificity in your Form 470, then you should have an RFP. So file that at the same time, upload a copy of your RFP if necessary. I will say that in your narratives, that you can use the narrative in the Form 470 as a mini RFP or mini bid process. And I don't want to equate this to the mini bid process inside of E-rate, but the Form 470 can act as a mini RFP, if you will. You've got quite a bit of space to fill in the blanks. But if you, and let's, in context of school buses today, let's state that school buses are unequivocally E-rate eligible. That has already been stated, it's done deal. So we've already seen 470s with school bus Wi-Fi in the Form 470s. I would suggest two things. If you're going to file a school bus Wi-Fi Form 470, that you do it under both Category 1 and Category 2, because we're not sure at this point how this is going to wash out. We believe and hope that it's going to be Category 1, but it could be Category 2 as well. So apply for both. And then you're allowed to state your solutions that you're looking for underneath of that Form 470. So then you have to wait 28 days. We anticipate it to be a normal cycle. So sometime in January, the 471 window will open. The 470 window will close sometime probably around the end of February. So during that 28-day open process, you should conduct a fair, open, and competitive process, and then select a service provider. Sign a contract with that service provider, wet ink on paper, some form of board approval or whatever, before you file your Form 471 on that end of March date. File your Form 471. This is the document that says, hey, I'm school district XYZ. I've selected Kajeet for my school bus Wi-Fi. My student population is this. I qualify for this level of discount based on these demographics, et cetera, et cetera. Upload the information as far as the actual Form 471 bulk upload templates. Hopefully those are coming from your service provider. And then revise your student data during that window before they close what's called the administrative window sometime probably in late January. Then that review, once you've certified it and hit send on your Form 470, it goes through what's called the Program Integrity Assurance Review process. One thing that you get at that point in time is what's called a receipt acknowledgement letter. This is the best chance for you if you discover that there's been an error. You, in conjunction with your service provider partner, should decide if that is an accurate Form 471. Make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, model numbers are accurate, et cetera, et cetera. If you find an error, this is your best case chance to correct that error. Then once you go through the funding commitment decision letter process at the end of the review process, hallelujah, but your work isn't over yet, quite yet. You've got to file what's called a Form 486. This is to confirm to USAC that you, in fact, are in compliance with SIPA, have conducted your correct processes up to that point, and then the services can begin and invoicing is allowed. So at that point in time, you must file your Form 472 if you're going to do what's called billed entity application for reimbursement, or you have a choice at this point in time. In working with your partner, you can elect to have what's called SPI invoicing or service provider invoicing, and that's where you pay your discounted or undiscounted portion, and the service provider invoices USAC directly for their discount. Next slide, please. So what do we know today? So there was a public notice issued on 10/25 requesting comments, which are due this week. There was a declarative ruling or declaratory ruling on the 19th that says E-rate is, or school buses, Wi-Fi on school buses is E-rate eligible. So again, when I say it's a done deal, there is actually a public notice, what's called a declaratory ruling by the FCC stating that. So that's a given. We just don't know how it's going to fall out. So that's where the public notice comes in. They're asking for comments. We intend to submit comments. Several other organizations are submitting comments. We would encourage you to do so. And before this is over, I'll put in the chat the link to do what's called a comment to this proceeding. The reason I encourage you to do that is because, frankly, we've seen some really weird comments about the fact that this is Wi-Fi or radio waves are injurious to students, so therefore they should not put school bus Wi-Fi on board and things like that. So we really would encourage you to do and make an encouraging statement to say, please allow Wi-Fi on school buses to become eligible under E-rate, and we think it's a good idea. I'll post that in the chat. So the public notice lists allowing for Category 1 Wi-Fi and mobility for Wi-Fi on school buses under Category 1. It will be eligible for this funding year. And then because 2024 is the year 4 of a 5-year Category 2 budget cycle, 2025 is use it or lose it. So just be aware of that coming forward. So the public notice was issued on October 25th. We think that the comment due by the 30th, we think it's going to take about 2 weeks for the FCC to come back with a formal ruling about how this is going to work. And then once they do that, at the same point in time, they will notify us of the window opening for the 471 window, which will determine how long the 470 window is open. Again, work backwards from 28 days to from the last day to file your Form 471. That will be the window closing for the Form 470s in a timely fashion. So what we don't know, category of service, 1 or 2 or a combination thereof. It's certainly going to be Category 1. And then if they decide to put the hardware, software, and installation services under Category 2, that's what they would do. But the services, the actual carrier services, would be associated with Category 1. And then we're trying to fight this. The public notice or public comment notice discussed a $1,840 annual cost. That does not cover the cost of installation of a school bus Wi-Fi, which we calculate to be about $2,500. And then the ongoing services in the first year exceeds that significantly. So we've submitted those comments. We did some significant financial analysis. We also, some things that we think are going to happen. Now, this is not etched in stone. This is Jim Kerr's crystal ball, but we believe leased school buses will be eligible under this program. And then again, probably a normal filing window. So that's it for me. On to the next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Jim, for sharing that information as we continue to your final slide.
Well, okay. So I apologize. Again, a little foggy here. So make sure you apply for all 3 subcategories of service under the 470, particularly if Category 1 for your school bus services, and as a supplemental, ask for Category 2 potentially for the actual hardware and software, but ask for it under both categories of service. Make sure that you have E-rate specific terms and conditions, allowing for early implementation. So when we talk about this scenario, oftentimes consultants, like I used to be, would put in their subject to funding commitment decision letter. And what that does is it ties your hands. What if you want to have service on your school buses starting July 1st and paid for by E-rate? Well, your application may not be completed and have your funding commitment decision letter in hand. So allowing for build under the application for reimbursement bear invoicing prior to that funding commitment decision letter is vital. Support renewal should be done under bear, okay, and must be for support only, no licenses. This is a general best practices. We've seen a lot of problems, and this is just my side comment. We've seen a lot of problems with applications where they've submitted for under internal connections support only, a premium support license or something like that, where it should have been under basic maintenance of internal connections. And to reverse that, we've seen where the licenses have been placed under a basic maintenance of internal connections thinking that it included support. Well, licenses should be under internal connections, even if they're renewal licenses. And even if they include support, they should still be done under internal connections because that's a bundle. Where it's pure support, it should be done under basic maintenance of internal connections, and it should be applied for by Bear because frankly, you want your support to start on July 1st. And then make sure that you use correct manufacturer model numbers and SKUs. We've seen a lot of this where folks have just kind of dropped off some numbers, transposed a number, those kinds of things. If that's not accurate, it will mess you up in the review process and be cause for delays. And then for basic maintenance of internal connections, and this applies for managed internal broadband services, where you have a multi-year contract, you apply for each year of a multi-year and pay up front, frankly. So in other words, if you say, I want a 5-year support SKU under basic maintenance, you're going to pay for it at 20% per year through E-rate, but you need to prepay for the entire amount and then seek reimbursement annually for that 5-year period. It's a better deal financially, but again, it has some challenges to it. Next.
Thank you
And
so
I'll
much,
leave it
Jim,
to
and
you.
I hope that you'll stick around with us because we have a few questions in the Q&A that I think that your level of expertise will be beneficial in being able to provide support. So let's talk a little bit about what to look for in a solution. As we realize this is new, and when things are new, we want to make sure that we always have the best support. As an administrator, there are so many things that we can look at. And I'm going to have my colleague who's on the call with us today, Eric, to kind of chime in as we go through these and talk a little bit about what you should look for from the administrative perspective, as well as the transportation supervisor perspective, as well as the technology director's perspective. So, do you need a platform to provide data usage reports for district reports and funding discussions? I absolutely think that is important. When you're thinking about the amount of data that you are going to consume for having different platforms and being able to use that for an audit or having it as just your baseline to be able to report usage, that is something that you should definitely make sure that you consider when you're looking at a solution. When you talk about built-in filtering, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about that with me, Eric. Do you need a service line with built-in filtering to limit student access no matter what device they connect?
So again, we want these slides to function as guiding questions as you try to develop your plans for what your school system needs. So a lot of our districts tell us that we have filtering already built into our student devices. And that is great, but keep in mind that when you are connecting to another network, sometimes those students don't connect their school-based laptop. They might want to bring on an old cell phone that they use for gaming. In those cases, it is important to have built-in filtering into your line of service so that no matter who tries to connect to your network, that the one you are providing is still compliant with the SIPA expectations or the guidelines that your school has set for filtering. So think about that as you employ or use a bus Wi-Fi router. Think about what your team needs to include and who might be connecting and how else the routers may be used aside from just bus transportation. Krystle, if you don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and speak to the last one as well. One of the notes I have is think about your fleet size when you are looking at this. A lot of school districts talk about, well, we want to try it out on X number of buses. We want to try it out on our longest bus routes. Also keep in mind, do you want to include activity buses for field trips for your athletes? When you're looking at school improvement plans where you've got to make it known to your board members why you are doing this, why you want this deployed on your buses, it's important to have expectations like improving academic performance. Think about your athletes who may spend 3 hours on a bus going to and from a game in the evening. When do you realistically expect them to have access to their online learning content? This is an answer that you can provide for that. Think about where you want it used, how long you want it used, and how many buses you want this to be available on to your students.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next slide as we move on to our what to look for in a solution from the technology director perspective. What is the best LTE networks in your area to support your students? As a former director, during COVID and when we deployed hotspots, this was something that we had to manage because I come from a district that's very rural and where one internet connectivity solution would provide support in one area, there were students that did not have that same support in other areas. So when you're talking about the ability to use multiple networks, can we discuss a little bit about what that looks like, Eric? I'm the transportation director, but from your side of it, when you're talking about multiple networks, what is the benefits of having that as a part of your solution when you're trying to determine how you want to go with this?
So some schools are lucky enough to have one network that can cover their entire school district, and that's all they need to think about, and that's great. With smart spots or hotspots, think more simply that you can pick one network and that's fine because wherever the kid lives, that's how they connect. Now we're talking about mobile routers. We're talking about a bus in transit. It may be that bus one goes to the northeast part of your district and can connect to one network, but another bus traveling to a different part of the same district may need to connect to another. Think about where your children live. What is the best network for their bus routes? So when you're looking at putting this on your buses, think about, do you need more than one network to be available? In that same thought process, let's talk about a bus with a longer route that may have to travel from one area where network A is the best choice to another area where network B now is the strongest network. There are technologies that allow you to switch from one network to another while the bus is in transit without losing that connectivity, without an interruption to students who are actually working on school assignments. That can be done in the background. So if your school system needs that, think about it while you're completing your Form 470. Make sure to be specific about what your district needs when you're looking at this. Again, sorry, Krystle, I'm going to go on to the next one because this kind of pairs in with this next thought. Let's say that you are working on one network. You thought this LTE network would cover everything. But as you begin deploying your buses, you realize, this doesn't connect in this section for my group of students here who need connectivity. What do you do about that? There are technologies now available that allow you to switch over the air from one network to another using a eSIM or a Kajeet Smart SIM. What I think this would mean to a transportation or a technology director in this case is if you realize that you selected a network, but then in fact you need a different network, this can be done without having to send a technician, without having to have extra equipment sent to you. There are ways to do that. So if you want that flexibility, that also should be included when you are thinking about the plan for your school district. Maybe it's not just pick one network and forget about it. Maybe you need a little bit of flexibility, and these are some options that can allow that.
Absolutely. And when you're thinking about the ease of use, that to me in K-12, it speaks volumes. Being able to make those changes, make those adjustments, as you say, without having to call someone on site, without having to go through a plethora of steps, but being able to do that as a seamless transition. Students may be on an elementary school bus in the morning, but in that afternoon, there could be a school bus shortage, and that same bus driver may have to drive your secondary bus, which changes the route, changes the location, changes the connectivity solution that those students may need when doing so. So thank you so much, Eric, for that. As we transition to our next slide, we're going to talk about the transportation director perspective. Now, we know that E-rate for quite some time, most of the key players at the tables were your technology directors and your chief revenue officers and your superintendents and your board members. But now we've invited our transportation directors to the table, given the fact that E-rate is now an available funding source for school bus Wi-Fi. So let's talk about that a little bit, Eric. In your experience as a former bus supervisor, let's talk about the installed routers and what that set and forget method means for transportation directors.
So I'm sure this has not changed since my time in administration. One of the most difficult things I found was keeping my bus drivers happy. One thing that I'd remember them mentioning over and over is I don't want another thing that I have to check before I take my students on my bus and get on my route. Talking about an installed router, these can be hooked up so that when the bus activates, the router cuts on. It's not a step that the bus driver has to take separately. Same when they get back to the school. They do not have to separately cut off these routers. This is not something they're going to have to address. And students are very capable of connecting to an available network without prompting, without repeated instructions. Once they know one time how to connect to these, that's done. The bus driver is not involved in that. The biggest complaint they're going to have to deal with is when they're trying to connect to TikTok and it doesn't work. The bus driver will say, well, it's not that it's not working. You're just trying to connect to something that we don't allow. That's the only thing they'll have to remember once this is actually physically installed. Continuing thinking about the bus driver and distractions on the bus. One of the points that I like to make when we talk about the school bus Wi-Fi is a student who is connected and working on homework, or at least engaged in a connected device, is not taking part in activities or behaviors that is going to distract the bus driver, which means that this is now a safer route. The less the bus driver has to do to monitor that child, the more time they can spend with their eyes focused on the road. And that was key importance as a bus director. Being just a little bit more nitpicky here for you transportation directors, if you want an argument about continuing to keep students focused, a student who is also focused on their device is not bored and taking an old pen and picking a hole in your seats that you have to replace the whole seat cover because you can't just patch it with a piece of duct tape. That's not allowed. So keeping them engaged is one of the best ways to keep everybody safer, to make less destruction, and to keep your bus drivers happier, leading to bus driver retention. One of the key points and takeaways I think that this solution brings.
And we talk about, the transition, and of course, you're saying keeping bus drivers happy. Let's talk about portability as we head over to our next slide.
So portability, okay, perfect. We got an image there. There are also portable solutions. Again, thinking what your team needs and wanting to be specific in what you ask. If you can't go with a hard installed solution because maybe you don't own the buses, maybe the person who does own the buses says you're not allowed to drill on them, maybe just because you have bus 158 today doesn't mean you'll have bus 158 tomorrow. If you are in that type of situation, a portable solution could be what you need to ask for. What this allows you to do is pick up the box and take it with you off the bus and bring it back the next day. The students can still connect to the same device on the same route, even if the bus changes. This also allows you, if you are thinking about fleet size and you are a school district of 200 buses, but you can't start out that way and you want activity buses to have some possibility of connection, maybe this is your solution. Maybe this is what travels with the football team to a 3-hour away game as part of their conference and allows those athletes to continue to be connected to their work. This option or this request could give you more flexibility if the hard install is just not what your team needs at this time.
Absolutely. Connectivity on the go. Every student always connected, no matter where they choose to study. This is an additional step to be able to help students to have that connectivity. We're working on that 12 million number of students that do not have that reliable access at home. But as we think about getting those students there, we want to give them as much access as they can on their ride home so that when they get there, hopefully they've been able to accomplish a lot in that time frame that they don't have to worry as much about not having that connectivity within their home. As we move on to our next slide, we're going to do one more poll question because I'm extremely interested to learn a little bit more about what everyone's thoughts are as it pertains to some of the information that we've shared thus far. So as you're talking about how our buses have been equipped, how many buses do you hope to start equipping with school bus Wi-Fi? The poll is now open. You know, Eric, as we're going through this poll, something else that you mentioned that made me think about with the connectivity and those solutions, you never really know what that day is going to look like. You may start off with buses that are on the go, and then you have a bus that may have some mechanical issues, and now you want to make sure that the students are transitioning to another bus. So I think about that portable option and how you can just grab it and go. You don't have to worry about calling and networking and connecting, but just pick that up and go, and you haven't stopped any type of connectivity for your students. So I think that is awesome. Just thinking about a little bit about what you shared.
That's a good thought as well. Or if you have to send another bus to pick up a bus that's no longer able to run, and you do have these all hard installed on your buses, it's connecting to the same network. So it's not as if your students have to go through a completely different process to get connected. This solution is meant to be easy and accessible for our students.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of smart bus Wi-Fi, the Kajeet way. An innovative platform, IT platform that we have that protects students, controls costs, and you can gain real-time insights is our Sentinel. Sentinel is the sweet spot for me because it merges all of those things in one. You have that connectivity. You can manage the devices. You can understand how students are using those devices, driver retention, and a few other things. Is there anything else that you'd like to elaborate, Eric, as we start talking about the benefits of school bus Wi-Fi?
In this case, since we're looking at specifically the Kajeet Sentinel, this is a good example of a platform if you need a way to manage your devices, to provide data and feedback, to create reports for the board members who are questioning why you have these and how they're being utilized. This type of platform is part of what you may need for your solution. And I would like to, again, even though we've said this once already, I think it bears repeating that students who are engaged while in transit are less likely to be involved in behaviors that are disruptive or dangerous. Just a big point to our transportation supervisors.
Awesome. Next slide, please. Now, this one here, I think is the golden ticket. When you think about, of course, we want to make sure that we're addressing the digital divide, and we want to make sure the students have access. That is, the goal is not for them to not have access. We want to keep them connected, but we want to keep them connected in a safe environment. And we think about the ramifications that can happen should a student not be connected in a safe environment. So when we're talking about protecting the education mobile world and what filters look like, can we talk a little bit about the allowed, the unallowed, how districts can manage that through the Sentinel platform, Eric?
So at Kajeet, we start with a SIPA compliant filtering that we have built over time and with experience. And we've set it in such a way that we think it will meet most of our customers' needs. But that's not where it ends. If you find that you do need access, or in a case where I was working with a customer yesterday, we found a new URL that should not be there. It's very easy to request and make changes to that filtering. You can block something that doesn't need to be there, that your students should not be seeing. And we can request whitelists for new applications that you find that your team does need. Again, we start with something basic that should fit most of your needs, but it can be customized as you need. I think we can move to the next slide. Is that right?
Absolutely. We can move on to the next slide.
So here is an example of our fleet for 1 year of data, the connections that our students and devices requested on these Kajeet Smart Bus routers for 1 year. Of course, you'll see that the school domain is the most frequently requested because of where the students are connecting from and how they have to connect. But these other sites are things that you should recognize as being highly requested and highly needed by our teachers for their students to have access to. One of the things we did choose to include on this one is just because we thought it was interesting that Kahoot at the bottom was included. I remember as a principal being very aware of this quizzing software. And if I saw this on my school system's platform through Sentinel and saw that my students were using this on my school buses, that's one that would catch my attention. And I would want to learn more and know how my students were utilizing that particular software. And maybe you see another one that would catch your interest. Sentinel gives you this information. This is all relevant information that you can provide to your instructional team to say, this is what our students are accessing, this is what they're liking, and how can we utilize or leverage this to improve in classroom instruction, using this bus as an extension of the classroom learning environment.
Absolutely. And when you're thinking about making fiscally sound decisions, because it all boils down to budgetary most times when you're thinking about accessing school and district-wide licenses for particular programs. So having this type of data on hand can justify why we may need to continue a subscription, or if there is a situation where it tells you that they're not accessed as much as possible, that also gives you proven data that maybe we need to try something else that the students can benefit from, given our data that we receive. So I definitely love, and as a former educator, Kahoot, I love Kahoot. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, yay, our kids are using Kahoot and we're providing the resource in the hub for them to be able to do so. Next slide, please.
Okay, so this is an example from our Farmington School District, with permission, of course. Just as a little background information, Farmington last year had 75 smart buses deployed, and they had some of their routes that would go up to an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's one of the reasons they thought it was important to have connectivity, because a lot of their students, when they got home, they no longer had connectivity because of where they lived. So providing that 1.5 to 2 hours of classroom extension where students could complete work actually gave this person feedback from parents saying, thank you, because I don't know how else we would connect once they got home. This was one of their solutions. This is a screenshot from their Sentinel dashboard. This is just one of the pieces of data that you get when you log in each day, and that updates. You can set specific times. This is a year of data from October to October. But one of the things that you'll see is on the left, what's being allowed, but that's typically not what draws people's attention when we're looking at this screen. They tend to be more drawn to the right. What are students trying to get to that is being denied? And through Sentinel, built-in filtering, again, that's important because of what device you connect. If they connect their own device, you still get this level of filtering because it's built into the line of service. TikTok is one of the big keywords this year, whether you agree with it or not. It is something that our leadership does not want available to students. And this shows you that, no, in fact, we do not provide this. If you have a board member that says we shouldn't provide bus Wi-Fi because we don't want students to have access to TikTok and Snapchat throughout the school day, this is proof that that stuff is not making it to our students when you have this kind of built-in line filtering. Next slide, please. This is also from the same school district, again, from a year of service from October to October, and this is available in the Sentinel dashboard as well when you log in. This can show what type of connectivity that your students are providing throughout the year. You'll see that in that very first slide, the homework hours online. That is across Farmington's bus fleet. Remember, it's 75 routers every day that are traveling. So during 1 year, this is how long those routers total stayed connected with appropriate connection to educational sites and content. This type of information can help you provide feedback for, again, why you deployed this. And if it was part of a school improvement plan or a district improvement plan, it provides feedback and data on how it benefited your students. This is connectivity those students might not have had otherwise. And in Farmington, that's very true. They would not have had that accessibility and that time on task without their routers. Next slide.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you so much, Jim. We're going to get ready to start with our Q&A portion of the webinar. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I believe I've seen several of our channel partners on today's call. So because we have a lot of channel partners here, I just want everyone to know that we do work with several different procurement partners. So feel free to use your preferred procurement method. Partners, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our channel team directly at channelsales@kajeet.com. We also plan to host a series of educational E-rate sessions in the coming weeks with our partners. So please keep an eye out for that. So at that little disclaimer, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our Q&A session. As I look through our Q&A, we have a couple of questions that I see. So I'll just kind of randomly go through those and see if we can be of support and provide some information. The first question that I see is, what is the range of the wireless network provided by Kajeet's APs? So for school buses, we typically concentrate the Wi-Fi coverage to the inside of the bus and a radius of about 150 feet around the outside of the bus. But as needed, we can adjust that depending on the use case, okay? One of our next questions is, will these slides be available for use? Absolutely. At the conclusion of this presentation, these slides will be readily available with our on-demand recording of this call, as well as some additional resources that I will talk about briefly before the conclusion of the webinar. This next question that I see, Jim, I'm going to give this one to you if that's okay. The question is, I currently have bus Wi-Fi, but it was under the ECF, and now I have applied for the Cat 1 and E-rate for service. What is the success rate for E-rate approvals?
Overall, 90% of all E-rate applications are approved. To not be approved means that you did something wrong in the competitive bidding process, or that you really messed up your application pretty thoroughly. And that also includes cancellations, voluntary cancellations. So overall, 90% of all applications. We have no track record on school bus Wi-Fi. There is no, we're trying to push back on any kind of condition to prove need like you did under ECF. So we don't think that that's going to be a consideration. So given that, it should be fairly straightforward, frankly.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's see. The next question that I have here is, all right. If I plan to implement bus Wi-Fi in my district, what technical components should I have in place to support my solution? I'll take this one. If, as a former tech director, if it's done correctly, there's nothing that you would need to implement. You would just need to look for a solution that doesn't require routing of your data back to your district for SIPA compliant filtering. Looking for a provider that will perform installation, training, and has a network-based SIPA compliant filtering solution would be great. If you want, you can set it and forget it, or you can modify online configurations and filtering settings with our solution. Okay. So I'm going to move on to our next question. And for this one, Jim, this one's going to come to you again. How will this work with E-rate if I have multiple service providers?
So again, we don't know for sure, but it's going to have to allow for multiple service providers. Even, redundancy is not eligible under E-rate, but this is not redundancy. This is to actually have connectivity. So it should not be an issue to have multiple service providers.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then the next one I have, Eric, this is for you. If I decided to move forward with bus Wi-Fi for my district, is the data real time? Meaning, how can I monitor what students are accessing on a regular basis?
So the data is very much real time. When I'm looking at data for an account, I can pull up to yesterday most of the time. And as the software evolves, I begin saying that we are seeing live what's in use today, what's in use now. But the platform is able to give you you can put in specific time ranges. You can look at the data of what individual routers are connected to. You can look at the fleet as a whole, or you can say, I've got a problem on bus 123. And you can hone in on that router and start looking at if something looks strange or if it's being used as it should be. There are so many levels of the way you can look at the data and what questions they can resolve, to the point of basically with a lot of your platforms that you work with already as educators, if it's blue, you can click it and go deeper. Sentinel also has that availability in our Insights program that comes with the software.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Eric. This next question is, how many IT personnel does Farmington need to manage 70 Wi-Fi enabled buses? I'll take that one. Just in our experience with Farmington, and they've been a long-standing customer with Kajeet, Farmington really only needed one person since Kajeet kind of manages the system for them, and we provide tier 1 support even for students and bus drivers. So they didn't need a lot of management once we worked collaboratively with them to provide support for their district. All right, and then I have another question. We are so grateful to have all of these questions because it is helping us to help serve you and to bring that support to you all. This one is for Eric. Eric, how long does the installation process for the Kajeet Smart Bus solution take, give or take, per bus?
Okay, the installation average is about 1.5 to 2 hours per bus. And if you have more than one technician working on it, just keep in mind that multiplies. So 1.5 to 2 hours per bus.
Okay, perfect. And then I have another question here. And I can take this one. It says, how many students can connect to school bus Wi-Fi at one time per bus? So with our routers, they support 128 concurrent Wi-Fi connections, but considering buses will utilize the 4G and the 5G networks, we recommend around 65 or less for a good experience for connectivity. We can configure those routers to best manage the LTE connection. And with that, each individual Wi-Fi connection will allow students to have their best user experience. So our recommendation would be around 65 or less to have an optimized experience. All right, this next one is for Eric again. Eric, you are popular today. Eric, if in our district we use GoGuardian as our device monitoring system, how would this work with the filtering provided by the Sentinel platform? Essentially, I'm assuming, do they work hand in hand?
Okay, so GoGuardian would not have any conflicts in working with Sentinel. They would work in conjunction with each other. So if let's say a student device is connected, both of those would protect the child from receiving any content they should not. But where Sentinel's built-in filtering would also work on devices that are not managed by the school. That's a small addition. There wouldn't be any conflict at all, but the Sentinel and built-in filtering would also provide protections when students connect devices that the school did not provide them, where GoGuardian is not available.
Okay, perfect. And we have a few more questions, and then I think that we may be done for today. Since our buses carry all of our students throughout the day, can I create filtering based on grade level and time of day? Yes, with the Kajeet Sentinel platform, you can configure each bus with a different filter and profile based on the time of day. So essentially, as we mentioned earlier, you may have a bus that is a shared bus. That bus may carry elementary students in the morning, and you want to have those filtering set just for elementary specific content, but then that same bus may route students for a secondary school in the afternoon. Those filters can be set based upon the time of the day, as well as the grade level, so that you can optimize the learning experience for students, regardless of how they are being transported on that route. All right, and I think our final question, and this one is going to go to Eric. How does the Sentinel platform work with E-rates criteria for SIPA compliance?
Can I just say very well and finish? No, because of Kajeet's experience in working with, let's just say ECF back in the day, or when that was still available, we had to build a SIPA compliant filtering to meet the needs of the government and of our school boards, what they need in order to provide their students. So there would not be any conflict in deploying the Kajeet solution because we already meet those criteria.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And this one just slid in. I lease my buses. Can I still get them equipped with Wi-Fi? Absolutely. If you want an installed option, you would just need permission from your bus contractor or if you work with First Student, Kajeet has already secured this permission and is their only authorized provider. So another option would be to deploy a portable kit, which we talked about earlier, which does not require a hard install. So yes, if you have leased buses, you do have an option to equip them with the Wi-Fi. So we're going to go ahead and move over to our next slide. As we talk about our school bus Wi-Fi resources, Kajeet has provided a plethora of resources that can be used and are readily downloadable. Please note that this presentation will be sent via email for those that have registered. We will also have this information available as a downloadable option for the deck as well as the presentation itself. But within that presentation, you will see resources such as our Connected Bus Guide, which helps walk districts through the steps of how to implement their school bus Wi-Fi initiative, as well as some of our success stories from districts such as Farmington and Mobile County on how they use our solution to provide connectivity for students on the go. Next slide, please. So as we wrap up today, I would be remiss if I did not thank my amazing guest, Jim. Thank you so much for being here to provide those readily available E-rate support questions, as well as Eric, who is my colleague here at Kajeet, former transportation director, principal. He's done it all, and we thank you for being here with us today as well. So please, for those that have been able to join us, thank you so much for joining in. And as we get ready to wrap up this presentation, please note that we will have additional information forthcoming about this presentation, as well as registration information for some upcoming webinars. If you haven't had a chance, please follow us on our social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Thank you so much. I'm Krystle Pearson, your host for today, and we are out.